Welcome everyone to the Tuesday, March 25th, 2025 Tumwater City Council work session. Oh my goodness, we're at the end of the first quarter of 2025. This year is going really fast. So let's see, I'm going to do roll call on and I believe that all council members are present, so we can move to the first agenda item, which is resolution number R 2025-007 commute trip reduction plan update. And Veronica, are you starting this? So, okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think I have anyone introducing me, so I'm happy to do it myself. So for those of you I don't know, my name's Veronica Jarvis and I work at Thurston Regional Planning Council. I run the commute trip reduction program, and I'm here tonight to tell you about a commute trip reduction local plan update that we've been doing in concert with your city staff. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and I do have some slides to go through, but I do want to make sure and leave time for questions. How much time do I have so I don't go over?
How long do you think you would need?
Oh, like 10, 15 minutes, but I just wanted to make sure and leave time for questions.
Yeah,
okay, great. Okay. All right. I will share this. Okay. Are you seeing the full screen version?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're here today to talk about the commute trip reduction local plan. And I have here, I think for those of you that aren't familiar with the program, it's been around since about 1991. I'll cruise through some of that information on my slides, but I do want to point out a picture here of Tumwater Square, which is like one of the transit hubs in your community. And you're served by intercity transit and rural transit there. So Tumwater is one of the few communities in our area that has a lot of connections to the south. Lewis County Transit also serves your area. Some of the other regions, so Olympia gets service from Mason and Grays Harbor Transit. And so you guys are unique in that you get service from a couple other transit agencies from the south too. But I did want to put some local flavor in this presentation of facilities that are provided for people that are trying to take the bus, bike, walk, vehicle, those kind of things. So that's what you'll see throughout my presentation. All right. So as I mentioned, the commute trip reduction law was enacted in 1991, and it was part of our state's Clean Air Act, and the goals were to reduce congestion and air pollution and fuel consumption. So it's done pretty well at that when you look at the commute trip reduction sites that we've been tracking over the history of the program. So the requirements of the law are that large employers, so 100 or more employees is what we consider a large employer, that commute during peak hours, which is 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., need to develop strategies that promote sustainable commuting. I put a tiny asterisk here, and it's down there at the bottom, but it's probably small, so you can't read it. But in Thurston County, we have a different, like a more intense version of the law that makes it so all state agencies in our region are affected by the commute trip reduction law. And in the beginning of that, it really meant mostly Olympia, but as you all know, state agencies really started to move into Tumwater, and then that made Tumwater have more affected work sites, is what we call them. Employers must create and submit a CTR program every 2 years and provide reporting and surveying on their employees. Those affected work sites are supposed to encourage carpooling, transit, biking, walking, and telework. And then each work site in the program does have an employee transportation coordinator, so sort of the transportation expert at that work site. And it's great to have a person at each different work site because, as you know, each work site has different amenities that work for it. I mean, there's like a warehouse in deep Tumwater that's off of 99 that isn't served by transit, so that's not going to be a good option for them, but Vanpool would be a great option for them. So really trying to tailor the options to each worksite is really important, and it's a huge part of the program. So every worksite has an employee transportation coordinator that they serve as a primary point of contact. We provide resources and information to that person, and they coordinate for that worksite their biannual survey and their program reporting. As I mentioned, we provide a lot of information to them. We also try whenever we can to let employees in the region know when there's going to be major traffic disruptions. I know some of your public works staff has me on their list of people to send things to, so I can push that out to the employees, because sometimes it's the best way for them to get the information out to their employees. So Tumwater has a commute trip reduction ordinance. That was what was required by the state law, was that every affected jurisdiction, of which Tumwater is one, had to create their own ordinance. So Tumwater has an ordinance, and Olympia and Lacey and Thurston County also have ordinances in our region. And just says exactly what they provided, standard language, and Tumwater took most of that. Some of the regions do have written into their ordinances that if you do not comply with the CTR law, that you can be fined. Not many exercise that, but it is something that's available as an option in ordinances. So as I mentioned, one of the big elements of the program is to survey employees every 2 years. And we just got a new surveying system after the pandemic. So we have some results here, but they have told us time and time again not to compare them to old results, because we ask the questions in a different way. And mostly to make it better at measuring telework and compressed work week workers. Before, we'd ask for a typical week, and now we just ask for the week you're on and what you did each day of the week, because we also wanted to recognize that some people are shift workers and things like that. So we'd like to think we're making the data better, but you never know. So this is for the employees that responded to the survey in your jurisdiction. This is the commute trip reduction survey results. And the dark green here are the people that work from home. And before the pandemic, I will tell you that the rate of people that work from home was less than like 5%. So it expanded exponentially, and it's hard not to just call that out, even though it is tough to compare the previous results. I did look at super old Tumwater survey results just for fun. And Tumwater has always had a very strong carpooling rate. And unfortunately, we've seen that decline with the advent of, the continuation of telework from the pandemic. The light blue, or the medium blue here, is 35% of staff in the region that responded to the survey do drive alone to work, which is admittedly so much better than before that it's just truly amazing. But I do also just want to point out that, we have seen shifts in other forms. I think people used to try a little harder to carpool with a friend or to bike when they could. And now I think a lot of that has shifted to work from home. But the program also provides information on greenhouse gas emissions, which I share with your staff. So I know you have sustainability metrics for the city, so that's helpful for y'all. So the reason we're doing a local plan update is that it's required by state law. And these plans, so each jurisdiction has had to do an update, and we're supposed to do them every 4 years. But we had gotten extensions on them since like 2009, 2015. We've been getting extensions on them, so they haven't been updated in quite some time. So this is a great opportunity for us to sort of re-up our collaboration with the city's other plans. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but this was just the point of having a local plan, is just to make sure that you're integrating commute trip reduction into your other planning documents in the city. So the transit agencies are also ones that we're supposed to consult with as part of this process, major employers and other interested parties. And we did that through some pretty comprehensive outreach over 2020, the summer of 2024. This is one of those processes that lasts so long, you have to check what year you're in to know when you did things. But WashDOT had some pretty specific outreach they wanted us to do on affected work sites, but also the communities around affected work sites, because when you're trying to get people to drive less to their work site, the impacts of that work site are the emissions in that area. And so you do want to also talk to the people in that area. So we used a variety of methods, community organizations. We went to Nextdoor, we used Facebook, we went to the employee transportation coordinators, but we did some pretty robust outreach. And one of the elements of the plan also is that we look at what projects are in your your city transportation plans that will improve things for commuters. And so I took a few out that your staff had highlighted for us, as well as an awesome glamour shot of Mayor Sullivan there when she came to our bike to work day down at Tamar Historical Park last year and read a proclamation, which was awesome. But those are the kind of things that are elements of the CTR program, is doing group rides to get people comfortable riding together and riding in the community, and having great support from the city and elected officials and staff within our jurisdictions. But the projects that were identified were the Deschutes Valley Trail, which will be a great connector for the area, Mottman Road improvements, multimodal improvements and traffic calming, Second Avenue pedestrian improvements, Rural Road shoulder, and then Israel Road and Henderson Way bike ped improvements. And some of these may look like road projects, but sometimes when you do a great road project update, when they first built the road, they built it just for cars. And now there's so many more requirements that have you think about the other users of the road, such as bicyclists, pedestrians, and if there's transit near there, making sure there's space and a good place for a transit stop. So I got a couple more slides here, and then I would love to take questions from anybody. We do want to make sure that commute trip reduction is incorporated into those other planning documents that jurisdictions do. So working with your staff on your comprehensive plan, and your city transit, making sure their strategic plan incorporates commute trip reduction. And I know that you guys are just doing an update to your City of Tamara bike ped plan, which is really exciting also. We just released through Thurston Regional Planning Council the Regional Transportation Plan. I understand you guys will be hearing about that soon if you haven't already. So there are elements of commute trip reduction in there, as well as our regional climate mitigation plan. All those things, just making sure all those things are incorporating commuters, people trying to get to jobs, get jobs to stay alive and get food for your family, and we're trying to help people get there. So that's something I'm really proud of, is that, you know, I work to try and help people get to their jobs and help them have more time with their families. So I think it's a really important element of our community planning. And that's my presentation. I really would love if anybody has questions or wants to talk more about commute trip reduction or how we're integrated with the other jurisdictions, anything like that.
Any questions? I do remember when I worked for the state, this was really, really important. And I remember before zero fare came into effect that you used to be able to get a bus pass through, especially through the state. And
Yep.
And so, you know, the zero fare, I think, actually helped a lot with the commute trip reduction program. So,
yeah. Oh, I was just going to mention, you mentioned the state active rider thing, and we used to have that, yes, for interstate transit and all the regional transit agencies, you could get on the bus for free. But absolutely right, with the new zero fare, it's totally reduced the barriers for everyone in the area riding the bus. So it's been awesome.
Yeah. Councilmember Doha.
Thanks, Mayor. Veronica, I dig what you presented, and I was just thinking, I work for a state agency, right? And I was thinking, how do you keep track? I know the agency I'm at is looking to move. How do you keep track of all the consolidation? Are there any opportunities, right? Like, I only need to go in 2 days a week. So like, how do you track all that and look for opportunities of offerings?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so in my life before this, I worked for Office of Financial Management of the state and worked a lot in collaboration with their facility planning group. And so luckily, I've just maintained that connection with their facilities planning group at OFM. And there is so much opportunity for collaboration between the local governments in the state, especially here. And so I keep in touch with those folks every couple of months on exactly what you talked about. So one of the requirements of the commute trip reduction law in our area is that if your work site moves, you need to let the CTR program know. And so what we'll do, I'll give you an example of a WashDOT facility that was in your region and moved to Lacey. So the Olympic region headquarters, which is right on Capitol Way. A few years ago, they moved to a facility out in Lacey. They let me know. We worked through what would be best for their employees on how to get there. We even did some heat mapping of where their employees live and looked at the options for getting those folks there. Like, does busing make sense? Could we get more van pools for these people? And it was an exciting time. And I rode my bike out to the new facility a bunch of times trying to figure out the best way to get to deep Lacey. So trying to provide those options for employees. But I think what you're asking though is how are we looking at trying to maximize the space in these areas? And OFM really does take the lead on that, and we always try and offer any support we can on getting more people to come to work in a hybrid fashion. I know Department of Commerce really leaned into the hybrid workplace, and they went from 2 buildings to 1. And so that opens up new opportunities for other businesses and or housing in our community. So I think while it is a state agency that maybe is has less of a footprint, it brings new opportunities to our community.
Thank you, Verna. One thing I was thinking is, what would it look like to be proactive that the commute trip reduction was a factor in what building they choose? So full disclosure, I work for Commerce and they're looking to move. So they're looking at places. And so what would it look like to have the commute trip reduction as a decision factor of what building they choose to? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, the more you can get in one dense cluster,
right?
The better. Get on the Capitol campus. WashDOT has so much spare space in their building.
Thanks for your work, Veronica.
No, thank you so much. Yeah.
Council member Swarthout, I think you've been up and down a couple of times. So did you have a question?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute because I figured you'd call me next. If you're ready. I love the whole heat mapping thing. I think that is really cool technology. That is amazing to figure out, that it is doable, that you could be able to provide that service. I was just curious because we had so many of the buildings like Department of Health and all those buildings down there, if anybody's still in them, because van pool was a huge part of it. I worked at LNI too, and that was a huge component of getting back and forth to work. So who's in those buildings and what does that look like now?
Yeah, I know. I mean, as has been mentioned, there is a lot of consolidation happening, but absolutely people are still van pooling. And thank you for mentioning that, because a really exciting element that happened last year in the state budget was that there was money provided for free van pools for all state employees across the state. And we're lucky here in Thurston County that we have the preponderance of state employees in the state. And so it was like telling every state employee, we will give you a free ride to work. So that is incredible. And it's a great retention thing for the state, but also for our local communities to say, hey, we'll provide less parking. We'll make it so you can get to work in the HOV lane if you're coming from the north. A lot of really great options. So yes, people are still van pooling, and as there have been more return to work orders, intercity transit has been incredible at being flexible and nimble in saying you don't have to do it every day. They offer a daily van pool rate, and you can van pool once a week, once a month. They're very flexible, and I think that it's a really impressive way of moving with the times that they've been able to do that. But yeah, a lot of really great van pooling options happening right now.
And they also adjusted their van pool rate. which
Yep.
makes it a lot simpler and a lot less expensive. It used to almost have to have a degree in a master's or doctorate degree in math to figure out the chart sometimes.
Yes.
So, yeah, so I think they made it a lot better.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jefferson?
Yes. What is your number one challenge, and how do you convince people who like arriving in their cars to, try this course of action?
Yes, great question. The hardest thing is that we've made driving so easy, so easy. If you want to do anything else, it's harder generally. In some places you can get, I live on the edge of Tumwater, and if I go down North Street, I can get somewhere faster on my bike because there's congestion. But time and ease really mean a lot to people. So one of the things we use in the commute trip reduction program is using nudges to do behavioral change. So often just trying something out for the first time. And that's why we do a lot of like, hey, promotions, you can win something if you try biking, you can win something if you try transit. So those kind of things are a way of getting you to try something, because getting people out of their habits is the hardest thing. And there are great times to get people out of their habits. It's when they get a new job, it's when they move, or it's like anything that's like a fresh start to them. A new year can do it for people, but really, I think the hardest thing we have to overcome in the commute trip reduction program is that most of our communities have been built so driving is the easiest thing.
Okay, so do you let them know via email? Is it a new, when they're new hires? Is it quarterly? Is it semi-annually? So when do you inform people? Because I've never heard of this.
Oh, well, I'd love to talk to you about it anytime.
Okay.
But no, this is a great question. So through our employee transportation coordinators that we have at each work site, it is their job to inform new employees. So most people have like a new employee orientation packet about options for getting to work. And if they don't, we're happy to work, the commute trip reduction program is happy to work with them on that. And then we provide updates every month or two, and then new information to those employee transportation coordinators about such things as, like, tomorrow we're doing a presentation to the employee transportation coordinators about the intercity transit proposed redesign. And then we'll do one about the bicycle community challenge that's coming up, but just try to keep them abreast of what's going on in the community. If there's new transit connections in the region to the north, something like that. I think that now that people are commuting to work less, a lot more inquiries that we get are, how do I get to Seattle for a day, a game, a concert, something. So we're happy to help people plan trips too. We're here for it.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Veronica. It's always a good reminder, because I think sometimes, especially as we're now coming back into on-site more people are coming to the office, it's good to have that information, because it's easy to just, if you're only doing it 1 or 2 days, those options are available with Vanpool now. That's much more flexible than it used to be in the past. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I don't know if there's a staff person that'll say this later, but this was my presentation of the plan, and then I think you'll get the plan in some council documents at another time, and it will be up for approval in the future. But if anybody has any questions or wants to know more about the program, about anything we do, I honestly clearly love to talk about it. So
yeah, so Administrator Parks.
Yes, so thank you, Veronica, for that transition. I was just going to mention that this item is expected to be on the council's consent agenda at the next business meeting, which will mean that it will be adopted at that point in time. If a council member wants to pull it off the consent agenda and have a conversation about that, we will be able to do that at the next meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so action will happen at the next council meeting next week. So
thank you.
you bet. Next item is Senior Services for South Sound Partnership presentation. And Administrator Parks, I believe you are going to start this.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a brief introduction to this item. This item is actually the first, the next three items are essentially a theme and a group of conversations that are all interrelated and intertwined. We wanted to give you an update on the community center design project that is directly related to what Brian Windrop is going to talk to you about here next. And then the final item on the agenda in terms of topics will be the WashDOT headquartered building, which, if you recall, in your last briefing on the community center project, that is one of the locations that could be considered for locating that facility. So I just wanted to prep you for the connections that I hope you will see between Brian's presentation and the next two. And I do also want to say thank you to Brian. He's been very helpful to me in understanding what it is that Senior Services for South Sound Partnership provides in terms of services to our seniors, and really the potential opportunity to partner with them for expanding those services. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
Well, thank you, Lisa. And I want to say good evening to everybody and really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you tonight and appreciate your public service as well. Lisa has indeed spent time with me over the last 6 months or so as we've had this conversation about the new community center. And I'd like to start by saying just plainly how exciting that is. I'm delighted that Tumwater is in a position to build a new community center because, as you know better than I, it is a fast-growing community and something that will benefit the whole community. So I've prepared a short presentation, and I'd like to do that now. So let me do this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I know that most of you are quite familiar with who we are, and so I won't spend a lot of time on who we are. You also know that Liata was a board member of mine and ours for a number of years, and I appreciate her service to our mission. So you have someone on your council who's well aware of who we are. Our mission has not changed in many years. It is to improve the quality of life for people as they age. And an overview of us right now is we just had our 50th anniversary in 2023. So we were founded in 1973. And here's a fun story. We were founded by a group of people, but the leader of it was a lady named Elsa McLean, who now lives at Panorama. And she did this when she was in her early 40s and had a house full of little kids. She went to her church pastor and said she had some extra time and what should she get involved with? And the pastor said, you know, seniors need a better place to be. And so she led the founding of the 501c3 nonprofit that we are today. We serve all of Thurston and Mason counties, and that's important to know. You may not know that. We serve those two counties, and we do a great many things across these counties. It's the case that senior services is so large in what we do, so diverse in what we do, that people usually underestimate us. And I say that because I talk to people about us all the time. And people experience us in one way, and they think that's who we are, and they don't know that we do these other things. It's like the story of the blindfolded people touching the elephant, you know, and they touch the tail and they think it's a rope. Well, people think we're a rope, or they touch the elephant's leg and they think it's a tree. People think we're a tree, but we're actually this large creature elephant. So we do Meals on Wheels. You probably know that. We do congregate meals. Those are the hot meals that people eat. And we do those not just in Olympia and Lacey, as you probably know. We do those in Tenino. We do them in Rochester. We do them in Shelton. So we serve the rural parts of Thurston County south of Tumwater. as well as in Olympia and Lacey. And I won't go into all of our programs, and if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to elaborate. But we do a great many other things. Transportation, I'll highlight. We transport seniors who are otherwise not able to drive themselves, which could be any of us eventually, to medical appointments and other urgent appointments. And Dial-A-Lift does not serve everyone, as you probably know, and so we are something that fills in a gap there. We are volunteer driven and staff led. What I mean by that is that I have about 50 staff, about 33 FTE for you that speak that language. But we have over 400 active volunteers. So we couldn't begin to do our mission without volunteers. We're absolutely volunteer driven. We've done this, if you do the math of what it would cost us to employ all the volunteers needed to do our work, it would more than double our payroll budget. We simply couldn't do it. So senior services is well established. I am the third or fourth executive director. The early days are a little fuzzy to me. And I've been with the organization since March 16th of 2020, which may ring a bell for you. That was the day that our community basically shut down for COVID. That was my first day. Eileen McKenzie Sullivan, my predecessor, had to unlock the door on the Olympia Center to let me in for my first day. And she and I and our bookkeeper were the only people in the building other than the park staff. So again, on our current services, we operate the Olympia and Lacey Senior Centers. In the Olympia Center, we share that building space with the Parks Department, and we'll come back to this later. But the building, the Olympia Center, as many of you know, because you are longtime residents of the community, it was built to serve seniors and the Parks Department. So it's not as though the building was built and later the city decided to put seniors in there. It was seniors who, from what I'm told, I wasn't here at the time, really did the phone banking and door-to-door knocking that convinced the city citizens to support the bond measure to build the Olympia Center to serve seniors. That was the interest in particular. So it goes back to the origin story of the building, that it was meant to serve seniors specifically and parks for all ages. In the Olympia Center, we do nutrition, as you would understand. We do all kinds of classes. The building is so large, in fact, and you've all been there, I'm sure, that it's easy to underestimate how much is going on in the building. And there are fitness classes, there are academic classes, there are art classes, just all sorts of classes every day happening. There's the lobby you see when you walk in, which is just a all are welcome lobby, as long as you're well behaved and not disruptive to others and those sorts of things. We have a trips program, local trips and faraway trips, local trips that are quite affordable and faraway trips that some people like to take. I mentioned transportation. We have an inclusion program for seniors with developmental disabilities, and it's called inclusion because often they live isolated lives from society. As you may have friends or family who have developmental disabilities, and you know this. So we have an inclusion program that brings them into the center, and they have lunch with other people and activities and so on. So many things happen in the Olympia Center. The Virgil Clarkson Lacey Senior Center is called that in case anyone on the Zoom doesn't know. The late Virgil Clarkson was mayor of Lacey for several cycles. And from, again, what I'm told, and I got to know him and meet him before he passed, he really led the charge as mayor of Lacey to build the senior center, pursued CDBG funding and other funding, and really made it happen. So it's named after him. He was on our board for many years. He was on our board right up until recently when he couldn't be anymore. So a really deservedly famous person in our community. So it's named after him. And in that building, unlike in Olympia, it was built to only serve seniors. It's been expanded once. We need to expand it again, actually. It's bursting at the seams. Lietta, I'll just say to you, because you'd appreciate it the most, that we're now serving consistently over 100 people a day for lunch in the Lacey Senior Center. It's just jam-packed, and the city knows that, and we're talking about a phase 3 expansion because the senior population is growing so much in Lacey, as it is in Tumwater and Olympia and everywhere else. So we have sole use of the building. It was built to serve seniors, and we provide the service for the city to seniors there. And we do all the same sorts of things as in Olympia. I don't need to list them, but it has a Lacey flavor. And I'd like to emphasize that the Lacey Senior Center is absolutely not the Olympia Senior Center. Every community has different demographics, different histories, different interests. And if you go to the Lacey Senior Center, and Lisa's been there, it not only is physically different, but that physical difference in some ways reflects how Lacey is a different place than Olympia. And the seniors who go there have different expectations. And so we're able to be the same organization and provide the same sorts of services, but do it with different details and different flavors based on what people in a community want to have, because that's our purpose. And if you have any questions, I don't see everyone on here, so you might have to speak up because I can't, on the Zoom that I see, I only see a few people.
Yeah,
wanna
and I
stop
can
me.
keep track also.
If you have any questions. So what do we currently do in Tumwater? Well, primarily nutrition. And in the current building, we do nutrition. We provide lunch. It's a hot lunch that we cook in Olympia and bring over to the Tumwater Senior Center and keep it warm and serve it there. And we do occasional SHEBA presentations. And SHEBA is an acronym you may be familiar with, the State Health Insurance Benefits Association. Really, you don't need to remember that. What you should know about it and remember is it's the statewide program of the Office of the Insurance Commissioner that explains Medicare to seniors who, when they become eligible. And I'm not an ageist, but I'll happy to tell you, I turned 57 this summer, and I will be needing SHEBA because even though I do the work that I do, there's much I don't know about Medicare. And so SHEBA explains that to people like me and you who might need that. And we do those in the current Tumwater Senior Center on occasion. That's about it, because of course the park staff do many other things there, but that's what we are doing there. And all of Tumwater is currently served by us, by Meals on Wheels, transportation, SHEBA, trips, home share, as part of our Thurston County offerings. So the impact we have on Tumwater and the way that we play a role in your community is not limited to what happens in the building, is what I'm saying. And currently, Tumwater seniors frequently visit the Olympia Center for programming. In fact, when we spoke about this at a recent staff meeting, I mean, people are like, oh yes, we personally know all sorts of seniors who come to us for programming who happen to live in Tumwater. So what could we do in a new Tumwater Community Center? Again, I don't want to take much time because we won't have time for questions, but of course, one of the things we're most excited about is the ability to cook fresh, hot meals on site with staff who really know the seniors well. We say that it's more than a meal. We're not just serving meals when people gather, as what happens now at the Tumwater site, but we don't cook the food there, so it's a little different dynamic. So we would very much like the ability to cook fresh, hot meals on site with staff who know the seniors, know them by name, and that those interconnections and relationships are a big part of what we do. We could have a welcoming and large lobby to host social time and activities, much like you see in Lacey and in Olympia. It's a safe gathering place for you name it. People play cards, people play games, people sit and talk, people sit alone and just relax. So the lobbies do that. Academic, fitness, art, and craft classes. We could do support groups like we do in our other locations. We have support groups for people with Parkinson's, cancer survivors, support groups for caregivers, and so on and so forth. Really, whatever the community would benefit from and any ideas you'd have are things that we could probably do. We think it would be fantastic to have a Brighter Days location there. Our Brighter Days program is for seniors who have cognitive illness, dementia, Alzheimer's, at a phase in their life when they're not able to be left alone very long, but not yet needing 24/7 institutional care. That's a period of time, as you may be aware of in your own families, like I am, that happens. And it is the only day program in the county that does this, where loved ones people bring their loved ones to us during the day, and the Brighter Days program is an enriching, fantastic day program where they play games and do art and sing songs and music and get a hot lunch with our nutrition staff. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. My own mother-in-law is in that program right now in Lacey. Well, if you're a senior in Tumwater, you'd have to go to Lacey to participate in it. And that's a big ask for people in those situations. So we would love to have a location in Tumwater at the new community center to provide that service. It's a unique program. We would have the ability to offer inclusion program, as I mentioned, and really anything else you think of or we think of that would help Tumwater seniors thrive. That's what we're all about. Yeah, Liata.
Thanks, Brian, for this. I always appreciate this and fully acknowledge I have a bias towards senior services because I care about seniors and I caregive for one. The one thing I'm thinking, Brian, if you could highlight, like, what I'm thinking for a community center in Tumwater is that intergenerational. So, like, could you showcase, like, I remember like Linda Terry in the STEP program, seniors and teens coming together, how senior services also impacts those that are caring for seniors, right? I'm just thinking of the trips. Like I used to take trips with Madre to the Rainiers game. She used to do trips. Like, how do you bring family members and friends together with seniors at a senior center?
Thank you for that, Liata. Yeah, it's a great topic. In fact, it makes me think of something else I hope I don't forget to mention about Grandpa's United. One of the benefits of having a multi-age center, so the Lacey Senior Center, like I said, is a dedicated senior center. That's fantastic, but it's not by itself a place that people of all ages go to. Where the Olympia Center is, there's a what am I trying to say? A daycare for little kids upstairs. So moms and dads walk their little kids in. And so it's a multi-age facility, and that's, I'm sure, what Tumwater's needing to do with your facility. And so the opportunity is that you can have intergenerational programming, and you can have intergenerational meals as well. So we're only limited by our imagination and our efforts. And the program I want to mention that was on NPR the other day, you might have seen it or heard it. There's a organization called Grandpa's United that was formed because these grandfathers were finding themselves isolated and lonely, and they knew that was not good for their health, because we're learning a lot about how bad that is for our health to be isolated and lonely. And they formed an intergenerational program to mentor, kind of like Big Brothers Big Sisters, but to interact with young people. And it was just a beautiful thing. And interestingly, I'd like to mention, when they studied these grandfathers who were volunteering over the course of years, it actually increased their brain size. They were not only happier, they were healthier, and their brains had grown. These are grandfather age people. So the field of research around aging and social interaction is tremendous right now and important. Okay, so moving on, what space needs would this have? Well, this is essentially what we're proposing, that there would be a dedicated commercial kitchen space with appropriate equipment and so on and storage. I've sent a document to Lisa that she could share with you that gives you a map of what this might look like. But it's a sufficient space for a staff of 2 or 3 with volunteers, so total humans in the kitchen working of 4, 5, or 6, to make 1,000 meals a week, that kind of scale. So you need walk-in freezers and walk-in refrigerators and counter space and dry storage space and so on and so forth. If you're going to make the meals, you need to serve the meals. And so a multi-purpose dining room for 100+ people as an event space. I'm sure that's part of the planning and thinking anyways, to have a Tumwater event space as part of the building. A lobby space for 50 or more, comfortable, inviting, warm. One of the fair criticisms of the Olympia Center that was built in '88 or so is that it's a cold space. It's kind of institutional. It has its own appeal, I think, with the large windows and so on, but it's not warm and cozy like the Lacey Senior Center is. And so I would hope that with modern design and aesthetics and so on, that it could be a very inviting, warm space for seniors. And then multiple flexible classroom spaces for up to 30. Lisa and I have spoken about this at length, and she's seen exactly what I mean. It's flexible classroom space, the kind of space you do 1 hour, it's an Alzheimer's support group. The next hour, it's arts and crafts. The next hour, it's Death Cafe. The next hour, it just gets used by all kinds of groups. And as in Olympia, that's something that would be, I'd expect that it would be shared space, scheduling wise, with parks who would be scheduling other activities that may include seniors or not in those spaces. I mentioned a desire for a Brighter Days room. That would be a dedicated space every day, 5 days a week for Brighter Days, fitting about 20 people or so. It needs to have associated office space and a restroom because those people need to not leave the room to use the restroom. And then a couple people would need office space for nutrition and activities. And more granular about square footage and all of that, we can get into that detail. I didn't want to bore you with all of that now because I don't think you're there yet, but that's an overview. So what are the business partnership models? We're almost done. The Olympia model is that the city owns the building. The city built the building, just as you're going to do. The city maintains the building, and the building is shared in function by parks and senior services, as I think you know. There is no rent paid by us to the city, and there's minimal payments made. And I say minimal payments because our arrangement with the city of Olympia is that we have a certain number of hours every year that are our hours to use, so to speak. And if we use more than those number of hours, then we agree to pay a certain amount to use those space, and we negotiate that. So there's a small, it's minimal to them and to us, but it still exists. Janitorial and facilities are done by the city. So senior services does not employ any janitorial staff or facility staff. The Lacey model is the city also built the building, owns the building, maintains the building, but is exclusive use of senior services, dedicated senior space. We don't pay rent, they don't pay us, no payments are made, no money exchanges, janitorial and facilities by the city. So those are 2 different models, similar but different models. The benefits are, and what I really want to emphasize as I conclude this presentation, that we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So we can provide low cost, high community engagement services. And that's the real benefit that we provide. Because we leverage volunteers and donations, we are a cost-effective way to provide high-quality programming for seniors in a way that really cities can't do the same way. And city parks departments around the state and around the country, for that matter, do a fantastic job. But it is a different sort of scale than what a nonprofit that is sufficiently robust is able to do because of how we leverage donations and volunteers. And we're also very close, because we're a 50-year-old organization, we're closely interwoven within the nonprofit community in Thurston County, and we can leverage those things for the benefit of seniors. So when our staff are working with a senior and they know that they need housing help or food help or whatever it might be, we know those people on a first name basis, right? We can talk about what they might need. So the benefit of partnering with us is we're reliable. We've been doing it a long time. I'd let Lisa speak in my absence about what she thinks about working with me, or Liata. But I think that we are professional and reliable, and honestly are found that way by the people we partner with, and that we can do it very cost effectively for the city, and with a really high quality of service to the seniors in Tumwater. So thank you. We partner with you now. Thank you for that. And we believe in the potential to serve more seniors with ever more high quality offerings in the future as you proceed with this new building. So any questions?
Any questions? So I think a lot of us are very familiar with this, and this is kind of why we're doing a revisit of some of this, because I think we wanted more of these things included in what we would like to look at as a senior center, so, or as a community center with more senior types of opportunities. So, Councilmember Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. A great presentation. As you went through that, I thought of all the different times that I've gone there or donated or gone with some of my my senior friends for lunch, and done a few volunteer things over the years.
Thank you.
It's a great place. I wanted to know one thing. Do you still have your boutique?
Yes, it's absolutely, and it's thriving, and it's like the best kept secret. It is the best quality clothing for the cheapest prices. I mean, like dollar rack, really nice stuff. It's called Bud Bay Bargains, and it's upstairs, so it's just out of sight. So yes, it's very much there.
I wanted to tell you two quick things. I brought some things in. I was giving to that. I do regularly, and I brought something in. I was on my way in, and this one gentleman goes, "Stop! I want that sweater right there that you have in your arms. It's perfect for my wife. It's her favorite color."
He didn't let you even get in the building.
Yeah, and I said, "Well," he says, I'll take it and pay for it or whatever." I said, "No, take it as my gift to you, and you give it to your wife." And then I used to work for almost a decade out at the Evergreen State College, and there was a group of students at least once a week. They wanted me to go with them to the boutique, and so they loved the clothes from there. I don't know, Kelly, if they're still into that kind of thing or not, but some of the clothes you see them in, I'm sure that's where they got them. So anyway, you have no idea the lives you touch and how with the service that you're doing, and God bless you. It's a great thing.
Well, thank you, Joan. If I may just respond and say that I say that when we hire, that we're honestly looking for unicorns. It's a joke we have internally that it's a really special person who works with us. And I don't say that with any pride. I say it just humbly as a reflection of how beautiful the work is. And all of us who do this work in one way or another, and myself included, I do this work because of my grandmother. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jefferson.
I'm not muted now. Brian, thank you for that great briefing. I know I had went to see you last year about rental assistance and how I can better advocate for our Tumwater seniors. So how is rental assistance going? Part one. And part two is, what is your greatest challenge? And what do you need from me as a legislature? Go ahead.
Angela, thank you for the time you put into that and making multiple trips to meet with me and have that conversation. Rental assistance is more or less where it was, in that it struggles with sufficient funding. And so we are not in a different place than we have been with not having found any additional sources of funding to make a meaningful difference in that. Our home share program remains the lowest cost housing option for seniors and non-seniors in Tumwater. It is absolutely the lowest cost because it uses existing rooms and houses, as you know, and the average rent is about $500 a month for the people who rent the room in the house. But that still can be too much for some. So the biggest challenge, to be quite serious, about 55% of our funding is federal
Okay.
through the Older Americans Act. It was passed in 1965 by Lyndon Johnson. It's had bipartisan support since 1965. It funds our nutrition program, our transportation program, and our nutrition program partially, not fully, but partially, and significantly, but not fully. Donations make up the difference. And right now, our biggest challenge is the worry about ongoing federal support for our work, and more broadly for Social Security and Medicare. There's no way to exaggerate the stress that causes among my staff and the people we serve. I mean, I don't mean to go there, but it's the truth.
Okay.
That aside, my biggest challenge is raising awareness about what we do so that more people take advantage of what we offer.
Thanks for your honesty, Brian. With these federal cuts coming, it's just going to be more homeless seniors and more hungry seniors. So, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, any other questions? So Brian, thank you so much for attending tonight. This was really an important conversation, and I think we wanted to bring this more to the forefront of what Tumwater does need. I mean, we do have a senior center at the Old Town Center, but it's growing too much, and it's not in a location that's easy to access for a lot of seniors. So that needed to be mindful when we go look at the new community center. So,
Mayor, can I just say one other quick thing that I just heard about the
yes, go right. Yeah, go right ahead.
I talk to a lot of seniors. Some of them are, quote, they call themselves leftover friends from when your mother was here. But some of them are my very own now too. But they love the fact that you are helping seniors with their pets.
Yeah.
It's the biggest deal, because you talk about loneliness or isolation or depression or all of those things. I'm telling you, people's dogs, people's cats, they're their other person. So thank you for adding that, because that's probably not real new, but it's fairly so. And some seniors don't know that till they contact your services, and then so thank you for that. And people can give directly to that program.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Joan. And again, too many programs to mention. It's called PALS, Pet Assistance for Low-Income Seniors. And last year we gave out $75,000, and every dollar, this is huge, every dollar given goes directly to helping seniors keep their pets healthy. We don't take any admin overhead. We as an organization are paying the staff person out of our own reserve, out of our own operating monies, and every dollar given 1-to-1 is going directly to help seniors take care of their pets. And the stories I could tell, the pictures I could show, it's incredible. So thank you for mentioning that, Joan. We could talk all night about programs.
I know we could. Yeah, thank you. And I just want to let people know to give to that you can give directly to that program. So if someday you come home and you're so grateful for your pet or something, send some money to the pet program, I know someone who once a month brings down food. it's their thing.
Well, if there are no
Great.
other questions, I am easy to reach, and Lisa has every one of the ways to reach me in her phone. So I'm sure that she can do that if you have any questions. And thanks again for your time.
Yeah, appreciate the update. Thanks, Brian.
Good night.
All right, next item is a community center design and administrative parks. I believe you're going to start with this.
Yeah, I am doing this for a couple of reasons. Chuck is at a conference, and this is just a brief update and a follow-up essentially to the presentation that you had back in January. We've had a chance to talk as staff and obviously working with Brian and his group to talk about what we need to do with the community center design project to ensure that we're taking the time necessary to really thoughtfully consider whether or not and or how a partnership with senior services could work and what it would look like. So I just wanted to let you know that the community center design project, I think the presentation that you got in January indicated that we were going to be bringing a final recommendation back to you sometime in April. We're going to, we've asked the consultant team, Barker Brinker CCAT, to give us a revised scope of work. And the revised scope of work is going to include additional time for them to develop additional programming alternatives. You essentially saw the recommended programming alternatives that had come out of the very extensive public process that they had gone through. But we want them to bring back at least one other alternative that would include not only those things, but also the programming that would facilitate a partnership with senior services, as well as incorporating some other ideas that we've heard from individual council members about things that they would like to see as possibilities in that facility. So the other thing that we feel like we need to take some time with is to make a decision around a location, and I'll get into that a little bit here in the next presentation. But I just wanted to give you that general update that the community center project is going to take us a little bit more time. It's a big endeavor. It's an important endeavor, and it's really important that we do this right. So we wanted to take a little bit more time. We will be asking the council to come to another work session, possibly two, depending on how we're able to put the work together. But we'd like to have an in-depth conversation with council around the programming alternatives and as well as the site location, so that the decisions that need to be made before we go any further with further design and funding and financing strategies are really well informed, and the council makes a decision or decisions that you're very comfortable with. So that is my update regarding the community center. We're really excited. I'm really excited about the option of augmenting the wonderful programming that our Parks and Rec staff currently provide our Tumwater seniors. They do a great job. This would be augmenting those activities and potentially allowing us to utilize our great staff that currently work on some of this programming for seniors and help us out in other areas where we have need for additional work. So I wanted to make sure I was not remiss in saying that this is not intended to be a replacement of what we currently do. It really is an enhancement, and it is a way for us to hopefully provide a more cost-effective approach to providing seniors with services in Tumwater. And I see.
Yeah, Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. It's really exciting, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation and the ability to talk about augmenting what exists and to provide better methods of service delivery and being more efficient, providing more space. Some of the other components we've also talked about in the context of the project pertain also to young people and young people who might need a drop-in place to get some Wi-Fi to do some homework, or to, I don't know, some of the other, renderings we've seen show like ping pong tables so that kids can hang out there instead of going out and getting in trouble elsewhere. So I just want to make sure that while this partnership is like super exciting, I just want to make sure that we also sort of keep that in mind too, to have a facility that caters to a lot of different needs and a lot of different hopes and aspirations for different segments of the population as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there is a lot, Councilmember Dahlhoff mentioned intergenerational type activities, and I think that's fundamentally important, not just for seniors, but for the kids as well. So yes, I will, we talked with the consultant team after the last council meeting, and we're gonna do a couple of things. We're gonna have them do a little bit more in terms of explaining what the existing programming actually would do. Many of the things on many of the activities and the functions that were on the map you saw were just easily labeled one thing, but are intended, for example, to include, you know, the opportunity to do all sorts of different types of scheduling and use them for different types of activities. You know, I think the sports courts are labeled, you know, high school basketball court. Those can be pickleball courts and volleyball courts. And so they are multifunctional. So we do need to do a little better job in terms of explaining what those, the programming that is currently shown in there, look, what it could be. And absolutely, those are all really important functions. And then but we also want to take a look at the opportunity for including some additional programming space that can be used for senior services as well as for other age groups as well.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Dahl.
Thanks, Mayor. Lisa, Michael just reminded me, you know, as we took this time to hear from senior services, what would it look like to check in with Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, all those after school programs where youth are not in school and what they're seeing, any pain points and what they're envisioning? I think that would also be helpful, right? So we have that full spectrum.
Yeah. And I do see Chuck is at a conference and it looks like he has been able to come on. So I believe that we have done some of that already. So Chuck, I don't know if you can tune in or not, but if you can, if you want to talk about whether or not we've reached out to Boys and Girls Club as part of this in looking at youth services.
We haven't talked with them about being in this facility, but we are aware of the programs they run and what they're doing. The city does currently fund their summer employment program. We give a stipend to Boys and Girls Club, as well as formerly the Fresh Farm, to help those kids get a little bit of money to volunteer and learn skills at Boys and Girls. We can talk to them more about what their schedules are looking like and what they're seeing for participation.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's what giving ourselves a little bit of extra time does, right? It gives us time to really be really thoughtful and chase down all of the really great ideas and, you know, and evaluate them in terms of, you know, Chuck is quick to remind us and appropriately so. You know, we have to figure out a way to make this space operate efficiently and effectively as well. So we've got to figure out a way that we can help pay, not just for the construction of it. We've got the MPD to help us with that, but we've got to be able to afford to operate it as well. So there's got to be some revenue generation. So we're trying to balance those, you know, providing the services that everybody wants and needs and ensuring that we still have a way to source it and resource it in terms of from a revenue standpoint.
Councilmember Kathy.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about Councilmember Althauser bringing up the youngest end of what we should be paying attention to, since he's the youngest person on here. And since I'm the oldest, that's why I was so excited about the first presentation, Michael. But I think that that's such a good idea, is to emphasize, you know, both sides of life in that way. And you know, when we had the was it the Boys and Girls Club on Chuck, on the campus of the high school over there, one of the highlights of that program was those kids, along with, you know, some of the grandpas or some of the other men and women in the community, they had a garden. And so, you know, as we're thinking about where we want to have our community center and all the different things we could have, you're right, Lisa, we have lots of different things to think about, and how we put it together is going to be an absolute gift to this community. It really is. So Anyway, thanks, Michael, for reminding us that you're still a kid. I like it.
Okay, so I don't have anything further on that. I don't know, Chuck, if you were able to hear my presentation, if you have anything else to add to it, but feel free to jump in here before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate that, you know, we've been through quite an extensive public process with community meetings and a really successful survey about what the community wants or needs. And our steering committee has been very active in compiling that and working with us and our consultant on what should be in this facility, or what people want in this facility, or what needs we're meeting in this facility. But and you all know, we just went through a painful budget process. A big part of what we're planning for this facility is revenue generation, right? So building it isn't really the big cost. It's running it that's going to cost the city over years. So designing it in a way that we have multi-use spaces that can be used over and over again in different ways throughout the day. A lot of those activity spaces will be charged space. So people using those, whether it's classes or art or athletics or massage, whatever it happens to be, educational kinds of things, there'll be a fee associated with that in a lot of cases. So as you know, everybody wants, you know, and I hear it from all over the community, everybody wants to be a part and everybody wants to have a free space. But we have to be realistic and what we're going to do in this building and how it's going to work. And then in the end, it'll be, you know, a conversation with you to make those tough decisions about what's going to work best.
Yeah. Thanks, Chuck.
All right, so we'll move to the next item, which is the WashDOT headquarters building update. And I believe Minister Parks, you'll start that one off.
This one's me too, but Mike has his camera on in case he needs to pop in and help out. I am going to share my screen. I'm going to try to do this without too much difficulty. And of course, there is the first problem. Hang on one second here. My apologies. And now I'm going to go over here and do this. Can you see my the screen, the presentation screen, or my notes?
And no, you just see your presentation screen.
Okay, good. I don't want to give it away and show you my notes. So this is really an update on the WashDOT headquarters building, which is located on Capitol Boulevard. You heard Veronica talk about this location. And this is one of our brownfield redevelopment projects that we're working on here at the City of Tumwater. And we just wanted to give you a brief update on where the project is since we got the grant last year, early last year. And we also wanted to just have an initial conversation with you about what it might look like if this were the site that the council selected as the location for the proposed community center. Again, as a reminder, you know, that was one of the 3 sites that you were that was reviewed with you back in January with the community center consultant. So we just wanted to, you know, and one of the big questions is, well, this site is environmentally contaminated. How in the world could we do that, and how long would it take? So at the end of this presentation, we'll have a little bit of information about what that might look like. So again, just a little bit of background for those who may be listening in and aren't familiar with this. The City of Tumwater was able to get what's called an integrated planning grant from the Washington State Department of Ecology. This is a grant program that is funded by and administered through their Model Toxics Control Act program, their MATCA Remedial Action Grant Program. And the idea here is to identify and clean up and redevelop environmentally contaminated sites in Washington State. That's the primary function of that piece of legislation. This particular grant is a $200,000 grant. There's no match. We always like those. About 75% of that $200,000 is being spent on actual site investigations, environmental investigations, and about 25% of that grant is being used on planning and implementation strategies. So we were able to hire Haley and Aldrich. They are a selected consulting firm. They do this work all over the state. They are actually a state of Washington consultant that works for ecology on an on-call basis to do phase 1 environmental assessments and this type of work at ecology's behest. So they were selected. They have completed a phase 1 environmental assessment on this site. And just for future reference, and I apologize if I'm repetitive about this, but I think it's important to understand a phase 1 environmental assessment is basically a desktop research project looking at historical documents, historical records, historical photographs. There's no actual physical testing or investigation that happens in a phase 1 environmental assessment. Phase 2 environmental assessments, which are the next steps, that's where you take the results of what you found in the phase 1 ESA, you do targeted physical testing and analysis and investigation. So we've completed the phase 1 environmental assessment. We have been collaborating with WashDOT because DOT, since they closed this facility back in 2021, they recognize that there are environmental contamination issues. They've been doing some of their own work and working towards trying to deal with the environmental cleanup on this site and figure out a way to transition it out of their asset inventory. So we've been actually collaborating. Our consulting team has been collaborating with the DOT consulting team on the phase 2 environmental assessment work, these targeted investigations on the site to make sure that we're avoiding duplication and that we're maximizing the amount of information that we are gathering about environmental contamination on this site. For anyone who's been involved with environmental contamination, you could do investigations and phase 2 environmental assessments ad nauseum to try and figure out the specific details. But we try to do as much as we can in the most effective way, and having us collaborate with DOT's consultants so that we can coordinate has really been a positive thing. And really the point of all that is to then begin to evaluate potential uses for this site, including in part the possibility of using this site for a future community center location. So I apologize for how horribly this graphic fits on the screen and in our format for PowerPoint. I needed to pull it over exactly as is in order to maintain all the arrows where they belong. So this is really a figure that's from the current phase 1 environmental assessment. It shows what is known about the site currently based on this desktop investigation that was done. You know, this site was developed by DOT beginning in the late 1930s. They operated it until 2021. It included administrative offices, including real estate services and project engineer offices. They did vehicle maintenance. They had soils testing laboratory and storage. They had a carpenter's shop, a sign shop, a radio shop, and they have had hazardous materials storage on the site as well. And so what you're seeing are the areas of potential contamination that show up based on the different information that our consultant was able to gather. So the types of potential contamination include, so for example, there was coal storage on this site from the 1930s through the 1960s for heating purposes. There are several underground storage tanks for different types of fluids and liquids. There are transformers that are located on the site. There in the vehicle maintenance facility area, there were in-ground hydraulic hoists in a couple of the different buildings. There is an area in one of these buildings where they were storing fluorescent light ballasts, which have PCBs in them. There's an old septic tank and drain field. There's a paint booth. There's an unpermitted landfill that's down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And then as with any historic site, there is likely lead-based paint as well as asbestos-containing materials located on this site. So then what this graphic shows is basically the physical testing work, the phase 2 ESA work that is being proposed for the site. So everything that is in blue is work that the WashDOT consultant would be working on. The stuff that is in red is going to be the work that that our consultant will be doing, based on the integrated planning grant requirements. And so this is just a taste of what it is that's going to happen on this site once we get all of the work plans and the sampling plans developed. And that work actually begins both by geoengineers, who's the DOT consulting firm, and Haley and Aldrich, who is ours. So then our consultants' work on this site is really focused on information that the city needs to understand potential risks associated with redevelopment of the site, and risks being environmental liabilities, construction challenges, those types of things. And that is information that the grant provides that is helpful, whether the future redevelopment of the site is based on a private project that would advance the capital corridor plan, or if it were to be redeveloped as the potential community center site. So the primary product out of our consultant team's work is going to be this risk assessment and mitigation summary report. And that really is to help us understand the nature of the environmental contamination, the associated cleanup requirements, what the challenges are for redevelopment, and then it would help us figure out ways to mitigate all of those things, and with an ultimate goal of understanding how we could minimize risk to whatever is a realistic and manageable level of risk that could be accepted. So when those risks and challenges and mitigation are known, costs can be estimated, and informed decisions can be made about acquisition and redevelopment. Again, whether that's City of Tumwater acquisition and redevelopment, or some private developer who would want to come in and do a redevelopment. And that's really the primary purpose of the Remedial Action Grant Program under the MATCA statute, is to find ways to take these derelict, undeveloped, or derelict facilities and properties that are sitting dormant and not being put to productive use, and figure out a way to get the environmental cleanup in place to allow those properties to be developed into an active, productive, important community asset. So I think Councilmember Dahlhoff, you had your hand up first.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate this. And I'm wondering, how does this align with getting the similar information for the other two proposed community center locations? Because this is perfect, right? To show us, you framed it really well for me, like well-informed. How do we overlap that with the other two proposed properties?
Yeah, so the other proposed property locations for the community center are not nearly as complicated as this one, because they don't have identified environmental contaminants. Other than, I'll take that back, the warehouse site does. The warehouse site, you heard, has a lot of challenges just in terms of public infrastructure availability and the cost to redevelop. So the level of information available, really, we're able to understand that site is going to be a significant challenge. And one of these other two sites, whether it's this site or the site that's on in the Newmarket Industrial Campus, are going to be where we're going to be headed. The site on the Newmarket Industrial Campus that was evaluated is it is a vacant site. It's ready to go. It is actually the same site that the Secretary of State office was planning to develop for the new archive library, and there are gophers on that property. So that becomes part of the challenge in terms of making a decision about moving forward. So I don't know that that was a long way of saying, I don't know that we will have this level of information for those other sites, largely because this site in particular has this environmental contamination component.
Let me just add, clarifying. Thank you, Michael and Peter, for your patience. For me to make a well-informed decision, I need the level of detail for the other two. Like when you noted that the brewery, it sounds like it's already out. Like I haven't made that decision. Like my moonshot goal is for the brewery, right? So I don't know how we move forward, but I don't want the brewery location to be dropped without further discussion of what it really takes to mitigate and the timeline, because there's different timelines for all of these and our timeline. So I don't know how we fit that in, but I don't want the brewery just to be dropped.
Yeah,
Thanks, Lisa.
yeah, of course. Councilmember Alcázar?
Yeah, thanks. I guess what I don't totally understand is like this is a state. It's still owned by the state. It is state property. It is environmentally contaminated. If this was a city site, we would be forced to, like, we would have a duty to clean it up. So I guess like is the MOTCA program sort of like step one of the state fulfilling its obligation to sort of clean up the lands that it essentially polluted, and or like it just sort of seems like the partnership here, there seems to, like, it's surprising to me that the state doesn't have more duties to sort of proactively remedy some of the contamination that we literally know exists.
They absolutely do have that obligation. And the reality is if this is left solely to Department of Transportation, which is the specific state agency that has that obligation, the timing, it could take a long time. We don't know necessarily what their cleanup would be in terms of their cleanup actions. So in the state of Washington, when you're developing a cleanup program or a remedial action program for a contaminated site, the end use of the site actually dictates the level of cleanup that's required and will then dictate the remedy the different remedies that are selected. And so even when I first started here at the city of Tumwater, the city had been talking, at least at a staff level, with DOT about this site and how best to get it moving forward so that it wasn't languishing too long. So the beauty of this site, yes, we're not going to let DOT off the hook, but this also presents an opportunity for, again, whether the city develops this or we get it to the point where a private developer can actually make it pencil for them, this helps get that site ready to go and help it be penciled, and helps DOT to a certain degree. Yes, but that's what the MOTCA program is really all about, is getting environmentally contaminated sites cleaned up so that they can get more beneficially reused. So I promise we won't let them off the hook.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Councilmember Agave?
Thank you very much. So the map that you just presented show a site that has about 80 to 85% of the surface area contaminated. And piggybacking off what Councilmember Dahoff said and Councilmember Alcázar just said, you said that based upon the end users' end goal, that we have to get the site to a point whereby the timeline has to be, at least, this is my own word, fast-tracked. So, given what we are hoping to do, I mean, because you use the word, if we determine that that we chose this site, and it seems to me that this is a site that we are choosing, although we are qualifying by saying if, in my opinion, I don't think we have the money nor the wherewithal to clean up the site to the point where we can have a community center in there, unless we have close to $80 to $70 million to do all that cleanup. This is pure chemistry. There's a lot of work that has to be done. There's a lot of chemicals that has to be dug up. a lot of those chemicals have an active shelf life of anywhere from 50 to 80 years, some more than that. That's a lot of cleanup that we're looking at, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for that, council member. So the way the MOTCA program works is the site investigation and the environmental investigation takes place, and the nature and the extent of the contamination gets further refined. So this map just shows the different things that need to happen in order to be able to do the phase 2 environmental assessment work. Once there's better clarity around where the actual contamination is and what type it is and the extent of it, and then also based on what the potential end use or the redevelopment of the site is, that will actually determine what the cleanup remedy is. It is possible that digging up dirty soil or taking out contaminated building materials and disposing of them in a certified landfill is one cleanup methodology. There are a variety of different cleanup methodologies for treating any groundwater that might be contaminated, but there's also the strategy in the brownfield redevelopment framework that we pursue in the state of Washington, is to look at how redevelopment of the site itself can also be a part of the cleanup remedy. Because the other strategy for cleaning up and or protecting people from coming into contact with environmentally contaminated material is to cap it, is to put some. So if you think of the Port Peninsula, for example, the Cascade Pole site, where they've had the summer concert series, they had the movies, that is an environmental cap. That is an asphalt cap that is over top of environmentally contaminated material, and that to keep it in place and to keep people safe from coming into contact with it. So the cost of actual cleanup is not yet known for this site because it is not yet understood exactly what the cleanup methodologies need to be. The other issue is this is actually, Councilmember Althauser asked a little bit about letting the state off the hook. So the remedial action grant programs, where the state of Washington provides money for cleanup through that program, is typically done on a 50-50 match. So the ecology will give you a 50% of the cost of that cleanup, and you need to come up with the other 50%. In this case, if we were to able to get a remedial action grant, 50% would come from the remedial action grant. And because this is DOT's obligation, then 50% of the rest of it would come from DOT. And really the beauty of this site and the fact that it is a brownfield site means that there are additional resources and an efficient use of dollars that could leverage additional resources to build the community center. So it potentially could get done for cheaper is the theory and the potential strategy. And that's part of what the planning and development strategy is intended to help us understand, so that our consultant work will be focused on understanding the components that the city would need if we were to decide that this were the site for the community center. But it also would, even regardless of that, it would help us understand for anybody how best to move forward with redevelopment of this site. So the risk assessment and mitigation summary report, this is just sort of a sample of what it would look like. That map that you saw, it identified what it identified what the environmental or the site condition is. So I pointed out that historic landfill in the far right-hand corner. It'll have a description of it. It'll talk about the certainty of whether or not there is contamination there or not. So in this case, there would be some ground penetrating radar survey work done on that old unpermitted landfill, the historic landfill. And so we would know either with with some level of certainty or uncertainty whether or not there was environmental contamination there. So it helps us better understand what might be there. I'd help us identify what the mitigation for that particular location would be, that particular contamination and location would be. And then it would also evaluate what level of risk would be associated if the mitigation action were taken. What's the level of risk of future risk associated with somebody coming into contact with environmental contamination or having to do some additional work in the future after cleanup would have already been completed. So then my last slide here is, this is just because this came up as a component of the community center discussion. And the issue was, how would we get the cleanup happening, and how would we get something built, you know, in something less than a decade, right? Because we've promised the community that we're going to do this community center building in the next 3 to 5 years, or Chuck can be more specific than I can on the date. This is just a draft scenario that tries to show a timeline across the top. The items that are in green on this are the community center project activities. The stuff that is in brown are the environmental contamination. And in this case, if the city were to, it shows like where there would be different transactions that would occur between the city and the WSDOT for moving forward with this type of a scenario. So it is, there's part of the environmental work includes working to mitigate risk. So down here you see the words prospective purchasers agreement. CD stands for consent decree. In brownfield redevelopment projects, when you are doing cleanup, there are a series of ways in which you can clean up, and then that methodology for cleanup is memorialized in a variety of ways. The one thing that's common is where you go in and you voluntarily clean up an oil spill, for example, you get a no further action letter from Ecology. That's sort of the base level. You can get an agreed order, which is for other locations, which is that's where the entity that is responsible for cleanup has an agreed document, an agreement with the state of Washington, basically says, here's what we're going to do. And Ecology says, okay, in that agreement that meets our needs. A consent decree is actually the gold standard, for lack of a better word. And that really means that it's like the agreed order, it's negotiated between the entity and Ecology, but it actually goes through a legal process, and a consent decree is issued by a court, and it's got the highest level of protection against future risk associated with environmental contamination. So one of the things that we would be doing, in addition to all the environmental work shown in the middle here, the actual construction work and the cleanup work, we would have to explore different ways in which to ensure that we were mitigating the risk to, in this case, to us, if we were the ones that were moving forward with some sort of a purchase. So it is something that fits within the general time frame of what we've been talking about for the community center building. And we just wanted to be able to provide this as an example of what it might look like if this were the site for the community center. And that's the last slide I have. So I can either stop sharing, or if somebody wants me to pull back up a map of some sort, I can do that as well.
And I want to just add one additional thing. Councilmember Dahlhoff had mentioned the brewery property. That has the $500,000 EPA grant, which is also goes along this line. This is just what it takes for this particular site. The EPA grant for the brewery site, that's a whole nother thing. That also has a whole bunch of other issues. All three sites have very specific problems. To just put it mildly, either it's pocket gophers, contamination, location, something. So, you know, this is just focusing on the one with WashDOT, which we're working on right now. So, Councilmember Doha?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mayor. I mean, you think about all the components. I like, Lisa, how you presented, right, that timeline, because I think if you ask any of us or anyone who's been visioning these areas, we all have a different hierarchy, right? For me, I want a larger parcel of land to have the interactive inside outside, right? So that's why I would prefer the brewery or over by the airport, right behind City Hall versus this land, right? But then you look at the opportunity of the Brownfields Fund and how to redevelop that. I was like, oh, so I feel like every time we get a presentation, like some of my lists switches and alternates. That's why I like how you're presenting it this way. And as we move forward to really go, what are our priorities, but also what's the timeline and what's realistic? So I really, really dig it. There's so many factors. And every time I think about it, my order changes. Right. So I appreciate the extra time to really be thoughtful and intentional about this. And for us to come together and go, what are the top priorities for our community now and in the future? So thank you, Mayor and Lisa. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's good that we are talking about this, since I'm sure we all do not feel the same way about all the different sites. So it's going to continue to be a good and interesting conversation. One of the things that, well, I'm a big historical restoration kind of person anyway, so this kind of looks exciting to me on all kinds of different levels. And I think it also goes along with us wanting to create more of a city center kind of feeling. Right across the streets where we just are doing the senior living, and, you know, building something more central has always kind of been on my mind. You're not after things right now on this. That's not why you brought this up, to hear what we wanted to do. But I wanted to say that this site, I'm kind of asking it as a question, does it throw the conversation about swimming pools back into a regional conversation?
I don't know how to answer the question about the regional conversation. I do know, and Chuck can correct me if I'm wrong, because he's still there, it looks like. One of the basic foundational characters and criteria for the community center, regardless of what site it is that there's plenty of room on that site for an aquatic center, for a pool of some sort. And so it's my understanding that that's been factored into all three of the sites that have been looked at. You know, in terms of a regional aquatic center, I think that is a really great opportunity to provide a very much needed service in a way that could not burden any one local government with that. You know, it's kind of like JASCOM. It's like our animal control facilities. We're all kind of pitching in. And I think that a regional aquatic facility, and I know that there was a study done, I believe it was actually a year or so before I got here, there was a regional aquatic study that was done, feasibility study between the city of Olympia and the city of Tumwater. So I don't know, Chuck, did you have anything more that you wanted to add to that in response to Councilmember's question?
Yeah, I can. I guess I look like I'm in a witness protection program now. It's getting kind of dark here. You know, we worked with Olympia and a few legislators in getting the second public facilities district option passed in order to participate in that with Olympia, Lacey, Thurston County, whoever would want to partner in an aquatic facility. We would have to have an agreement in place. Not a funding strategy necessarily or a significant plan, but at least an agreement that we're moving towards that by July of 2026. That's when that package expires, unless we have some kind of an agreement with a partner to do that. So Olympia is still interested. Siting is difficult. Finding a facility site that serves both of our communities, if we're the two partners. They are currently replacing their parks director. He left to go to Tacoma. So they're in the process of hiring a new Parks and Recreation director, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when that position's filled.
Thanks for that. I just, I knew about the previous one because I remember the brewery area was looked at for that.
Mhm.
And so if somebody were to ask about that in relationship to the DOT, we could say that the pool idea is regionally still on the still in discussion. In other words, because we're picking, I think, a bit of a smaller site, we're not giving up on the aquatic center.
That would be a correct statement. It will fit on that site, and we do have a drawing with aquatics on that site as an alternative. But I don't know location-wise if that meets Olympia's needs. It's something we'll have to talk about.
Yeah. I thought maybe it'd be aquatic on that site.
So the one thing that so we will be doing a brewery project review and update very soon as well. There has been a lot of work going on with that EPA grant. It has suffered from some delays based on staffing resources at EPA. We've had a changeover in staff, and now there's just it's just like, you know, Brian was indicating, it's like anything related to whether it's federal funding or just having federal people to talk to and deal with is a little bit unknown, and we don't have it near as bad as a lot of other people. But so the EPA project is moving forward. The other thing is that the brewery redevelopment project includes doing what's called a planned action EIS. So there is a plan. It is on the current 2025 long range work plan. We have Kelly with us now, Kelly Adams, the new assistant city administrator. This is one of her top priorities. We have money in the budget to hire a consultant to help with a planned action EIS. And that planned action EIS is intended to be a regionally collaborative process that will help to evaluate what actually can be done on the brewery properties, including an analysis of all of those really frustrating problems that private developers have when they come and ask questions about what they can do on the property in terms of public infrastructure. So there's already been a whole lot of planning. You know, the comprehensive plan talks about the area, the brewery redevelopment plan, the brewery district plan, excuse me, trying to get the right terminology. There's been a lot of community input into the vision for the brewery properties over the last, many years. So the plan isn't to completely revisit that, but there's a lot of questions that remain in terms of how do you get water back to the site? How do you get power back to the site? What are we going to do with transportation? How do we coordinate and collaborate and make sure that the plans for the East Street connection are facilitated? And how do we make sure that we've got good habitat restoration and we're dealing with floodplain issues? So that overall planned action EIS process will help bring a lot of clarity around how to take that property and move it forward, whether it's the site of a regional aquatic center, whether it's the site of a new expanded YMCA facility, whether it's the site of a new, private development that's commercially oriented or hospitality oriented. Like all of those things can move forward once we actually have a better picture of the environmental contamination that may exist on the property and how we can move forward with this, understanding what the barriers are and what the solutions are for getting the property back into some sort of a productive community-oriented use.
Can I ask one quick question? Is the owner, Patel, is he open to doing a particular project on just a part of the brewery property, or what's the deal there?
I think Mr. Patel is looking for any and all options to do something on the property, and the barriers are the same regardless of if you're Mr. Patel or the gentleman from Bend. The public infrastructure is not there to support hardly anything, whether it's a permitted use or not. A lot of the question was whether or not it should be used for warehouse distribution or not, the last question. Aside from that, the real difficult challenge is the public infrastructure. and the environmental, the unknowns associated with the environmental contamination on that site. So that's what we're trying to resolve, slowly. The wheels of government are not the fastest. And so we're doing what we can, but with we do want to come to you with an update on that project specifically. Give Kelly a couple more weeks to get her feet under her, and try to come back with more of a work plan on how we get started on that planned action EIS process, and how we continue to push along the EPA phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment work on that site.
Thanks, Lisa. This is just like Councilmember Dahlhoff said, this is a great, you've done a very good job of starting, and doing what you said you wanted to do, put together, kind of a train here of things to look at. And you've been a good engine, pulled it along. It's good. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the city of Tumwater has a lot of challenges between environmental cleanup, pocket gophers, and, so all of these sites have issues, and it's kind of like, which one can we mitigate first and best, and meet the long range plan. So it's challenging. All right, is there anything else on this topic? All right, so we're going to move to the Mayor City Administrator report, and I will start with Administrator Parks.
Yes, let me pull up one thing. I don't have a lot because I've already been talking enough. You have heard enough from me probably. I did want to say though that I got some information from our wonderful communications team. So it sounds like the transportation open house last week went very well. I think we had like upwards of 40 people or so attending that. And just as a reminder to you all that you can convey this out and to the public, the transportation open house, there's an online transportation open house that still is ongoing. That's from March 20th through April 2nd. So that information can be found on our website. And also, just so you know, April 9th is the Green Business Awards next week. Is that next week? Week after next, sorry.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks. That's at the Thurston Chamber meeting. 2 weeks from 2 weeks from tomorrow is the Green Business Awards. So we've got we aren't getting an award this year. We can't win every year, but that is something that we're going to be attending and participating in. And then we'll have a lot of different information coming out to you about events coming up. Our Parks and Recs department has been very busy organizing all of our typical events. There is the One Water newsletter from the Water Resources Department is going to be coming out here very soon. And I would just say too, thank you to Brandon, and then also to Acting Chief Mason and a couple of his staff people for participating in the Tumwater Chamber luncheon last weekend, doing a presentation. They did, it was well received, and sounds like they did a great job. So with that, I will answer any questions.
So I don't have a lot to add to what Administrator Dahlhoff, I see I'm reading a name on the chart. Administrator Parks had said, so you're right underneath my picture. So so next week is City Council, actually on April Fools, which is very interesting. And just to be aware too, I keep hearing that there's a possibility of some extreme weather tomorrow. So just be paying attention and know that staff is paying very close attention to all of that with any kind of things we have. It's like we have a beautiful day today and then incredible weather tomorrow. So with that, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.